The music playing faster than normal, or is that just me? It's the same Christmas beat. It's just faster. Like there's nothing else different about it. Yeah, I think you just have it on fast forward then, Mike.
Gotta chop the Tchaikovsky just a little different.
What if we just? Yeah, I'm good. It is the Awesemo NFL lineup building show. We got Matt Savoke and I going through some top stacks. We've got the Christmas music up top, which is not being sung by Mariah Carey. I'm pretty sure Mike just made a mistake and he's just playing the normal Christmas song on like 3x speed because it's just firing through. But that aside, we've got some NFL lineups to build here. We've got some stacks to talk about. Matt, how you feeling about the slate this weekend?
I'm feeling pretty good. I don't like the value options, so I'm thrilled to not talking about values at all and just talking about the passing attacks that we can count on this week, and then getting to some really good value stacks towards the end here. So it should be good.
Yeah, and something else to point out, because we're about to build some lineups using Fantasy Cruncher, using the Top Stacks tool we have over on awesemo.com. Top Stacks tool, free to use today. So it's a free piece of content. And that's something you guys can go check out and ask some questions about, build some lineups along with us. And we're going to be starting with the first team that I've written down. It would have helped if I just remembered off the top of my head instead of having to refer back to my run sheet here. But we've got a DK stack here. We're starting with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, a team that pops up fairly frequently for us on this show. And we're building some stacks. And it's no wonder why, because we've got Tom Brady quarterback. He's got lots of weapons to throw to and some fairly low ownership this week. If you look at our top stacks tool, we have Tom Brady project for 6.2% ownership, 15.6% chance to be the top scoring team of the slate. That is the number one stack of the week. So before we go and build these lineups, Matt, what are just some overall thoughts you have on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers? And Mike, you can pull up Fantasy Cruncher now.
Yeah, my overall thoughts are we're putting way too much ownership on Leonard Fournette based on the defensive matchup here. Yes, it is easier to run against the Bills than it is to throw. In schedule adjusted fantasy points allowed, which is the defensive metric that I tend to look at for fantasy football, which is just fantasy points allowed contextualized for the offenses the defense has played against. The Bills are number one in the NFL against opposing wide receivers, toughest for opposing offense, but they're down at 20 for running backs. That said, the Buccaneers offense is a completely different breed, in my opinion, and they are matchup proof, in my opinion, in their ability to just get a ton of production from multiple players. We don't always know who it's going to be week to week, but the production is so high week to week. I want to bet on this passing attack, especially in tournaments when I know so much ownership is going to Fournette instead.
Yeah, and also if you look at the total this game right now, 53.5, by far the highest total of any game on the slate. We don't really have that many games with significant totals. 53.5. The next highest total on the slate, we've got the Bengals 49ers game, 49-point total. We've got the Chiefs Raiders game, 48-point total. We've got Washington Dallas 48-point total. So we're seeing this Tampa Bay Bills game with about a 5-point higher total than any other game on the slate. And in addition, the majority of the games we're looking at here, like 42, 43, 41 point totals. It doesn't look like there's going to be very many high scoring games this week. This appears to be one to target. So let's go to Fantasy Cruncher and start building some of these lineups. And I know you're probably on the same page as me with this, but Tom Brady, pocket passing quarterback, we're not going to get a lot of rushing upside from. Safe to assume that you want to be pairing Tom Brady with two of his pass catchers here.
Yeah, I absolutely do want to be pairing him with two pass catchers. There are some specific stipulations in this game where maybe if I'm stacking him with multiple Bills receivers as run back options, but we don't need to go into that in this show. In this case, the answer is a resounding yes. We want two of his pass catchers.
Yeah, and then because one of the reasons that you also mentioned that you want to try to get some leverage off of Leonard Fournette, do we want to include Leonard Fournette in our Tampa Bay stacks, or are we just going to look at the pass catchers and get as much leverage as possible off of Fournette?
I think in a vacuum, you could say yes, include him. But because of the ownership, like you said, I would say no, don't include him.
Okay, so if he pops up, fine. But in general, we're not going to force it. So we'll make that rule. And since they're playing against the Buffalo Bills, Mike, let's include one run back option. So just go stack QB with at least one wide receiver tight end from opposing team add that rule in, and yeah, we are good to go there. And then just make sure that we have the right slate selected. I think we do, but just in case, yep, we got the right one selected. And then do we have randomness turned on? So set the randomness to let's say 30% for the purposes of making sure that we have these lineups built, fairly quickly. Then we can crunch these and see what pops up. Now, Matt, the question I like to ask you: which of Tom Brady's pass catchers do you believe is going to show up in stacks the most often?
Ooh, I think it's going to be Chris Godwin here. I think it's going to be Chris Godwin, then Gronkowski, then Evans. But I wouldn't be surprised if I got it way wrong. I did run it a little bit earlier in the week, just trying out some stacks, but it's been a couple days, so we'll see what the optimizer spits out now.
All right, Mike, let's see the results. What do we have here? We've got Tom Brady at quarterback. Obviously, we've locked him in. He's going to be the most popular play because we locked him. So that's going to be 100%. Chris Godwin, we're getting to a lot. Rashad Perryman, surprisingly popping up at 54%. Wow. So we've got Perryman. Obviously, at some point with these Buccaneers pass catchers being a little bit more expensive, I guess the optimizer is just looking towards Perryman as a viable value option. He's not somebody who I was considering off the top of my head, but how do you feel about him popping up for a lot of these stacks?
So I'm looking at it now. Since week 11, Perriman has played in 2 of the 3 games and has averaged a 52% snap share in the games that he's played. That is 6th on the team behind players like, of course, the big 3, Leonard Fournette and Tyler Johnson. So I guess it's viable. He's at 63 air yards in 2 games. So it does feel like really a large field tournament option. I kind of wonder if maybe we would do some work in groups here if we were spending some more time on this to make sure we're boosting some of his big 3 pass catchers here. But I don't hate the play, especially if you're playing a lot against a lot of people this weekend.
Yeah, and he's the flat min on DK. It's a slate where this is always subject to change. But like you said at the top, you don't like that much value on this slate. And if we're going to be stacking a more expensive quarterback here with expensive receiving options, maybe it does make sense to have Rashad Perryman in the mix just from the standpoint of, hey, there isn't that much value to be had. At least we're going to be getting a piece of value that reasonably has some upside, and we have a little bit of correlation with the quarterback. Let's look at the run back options, and it looks like Cole Beasley popping up a whole ton. Now, I know our projections have been fairly high on Cole Beasley a lot this year. He does have a reasonable price tag on DK at 5,000. In general, I think Cole Beasley is a better DK option than FanDuel option because of the PPR bonus. But for this particular week, do you have any reservations about Cole Beasley? Because we have seen his target share dip ever since Dawson Knox came back from injury.
Yeah, and I'm trying to do my best. I don't want to put my finger on the models too much, but to not wait last week so much because the weather obviously impacted things so much. But the thing that really does concern me is that if you just look over the Bills' last 3 games in target share, that's the amount of targets divided by total team targets. Cole Beasley is 4th on the team totem pole behind Emmanuel Sanders and Dawson Knox. So I don't hate the play. Like you said, on a full PPR platform like DraftKings, Beasley is a fine play, but I do worry a little bit. We're going to see more variability in his target share, not less going forward.
Yeah, and I think you do bring up a good point, is that if you're just looking at some of those numbers, you can't take too much out of last game. I mean, we saw Mac Jones on the other side of the game throw the ball 3 times, and I don't want to go down a rabbit hole complaining about how that moved his rookie of the year odds again, but it's totally ridiculous. Like Kurt Warner was on national TV saying like, "Oh, I'm really impressed by Mac Jones." But we're valuing wins a little bit too much. If you're looking at Mac Jones going 2 of 3 passing for 19 yards, being like, "Oh, look, this guy's somebody to build around." Not that he isn't, but I wouldn't draw conclusions from that game. What do you make of some of these other guys who are popping up in these stacks, Matt? And Mike, if you still have that screen up, I'm curious just to see who are some of the other pieces that are coming up around here. A bunch of Chargers guys here. See Jared Cook popping up. We're getting to Mike Williams. It looks there. Anything there that you
to the wide receiver tab, Mike? Yeah. So yes. Obviously, if I were working on this more, I would want to force some run backs with Stephon Diggs. I definitely would. I know it's going to be strapping you for salary somewhere else in your lineups, but I'm seeing No Stephon Diggs, if I'm correct here. Obviously, I'm fine with Emmanuel Sanders. The player I like actually second best, and especially when you're talking about just low salary access to this high total game. You mentioned it, Greg. There aren't a lot of high total games, certainly none at this level on the main slate. I do want some Dawson Knox here. 95% snap share over the last 3 weeks, 144 air yards, a second on the team, only to Stephon Diggs, and he's got a 20% target share. So that's someone I really am going to boost up if I'm playing this stack.
Yeah, I think that totally makes sense. And somebody else who we've seen some upside from. Also, shout out to Sammy Telesco leaving us a super chat here saying that he sticks to the Awesemo script and he is crushing it on Underdog. I love it. I love to see people watching the shows do well, and always the super chats are appreciated as well. So good work, Sammy, and I love to see it. Let's head on over to FanDuel now, and we'll start making stacks over there. And this is a team that, believe it or not, has not popped up very frequently on the show. A team that last year, at least, I was making stacks of all the time. That is the Kansas City Chiefs and Patrick Mahomes. It's been a team that in the past has had an elite offense, and I still like to think it's an elite offense. But do we have to change our expectations for Patrick Mahomes in Kansas City? We're 3/4 of the way through the season, and it's not the team of old.
Absolutely not. It is absolutely not the team of old, and they definitely have more mistake-prone offense than we've seen in recent years. But I was looking at some advanced stats like interceptions off plays that touched receivers' hands. I can't believe we have charted plays like that now. Mahomes, of course, leads the league in those types of plays. So, or in interceptions on passes that were not graded interceptable. My point is, there is a little bit of randomness here. Not to say that this isn't on the Chiefs, it's not their responsibility to fix. It certainly is. But I understand why our projections are sort of leaning on us going back to the well, leaning on those recent historical projections. We know what the ceiling is when Travis Kelce, Tyreek Hill, and Patrick Mahomes have plus matchup. Hey, they just scored 41 points on this team a few weeks ago, so we know what they're capable of.
Yeah, and then something else I'll add about the Kansas City Chiefs. They're not all that popular this week, at least relative to what our projections are here. So we have the Kansas City Chiefs, 16.5% chance to be the top overall stack on FanDuel, the best of any team on the FanDuel slate, 10.2% expected ownership going to Patrick Mahomes. That does look a little low relative to our projections. So we could go, I think, stack up this team overweight to the field on them and not too much real hesitation. The only thing that maybe becomes a bit of a concern as we set some of our stack rules here, they're going to be expensive. So with that in mind, Matt, do you want to make one or two run stack options with Patrick Mahomes, considering that the price points could maybe be a little restrictive?
Yeah, let's just do one here. They make it nearly impossible to get to Mahomes, Kelce, and Hill unless you just have a bevy of free square options. We certainly don't have that this week, so let's do one.
All right, so we're going to go with one. And like you said, or like I've been saying, anything could change. And that's all the more reason you guys should be liking this video, subscribing to the YouTube channel. We're going to have NFL Live Before Lock over the weekend. We're going to be having our 4.5-hour NFL show on Sunday morning. And then we'll have all the most updated information. And once those Schefter tweets come out at midnight on Saturday night, those could always flip the entire slate around and then change the value options. But for now, could be a little restrictive trying to get multiple stack options with Patrick Mahomes. But how about as a run back? Do you want to have Raiders as a run back stack in our Chiefs stacks?
This one I thought about for a little bit. I think the answer is yes, but the longer answer is it is contest specific. I'm always okay getting to a skinny stack of just Chiefs, especially if you're talking like a single entry or 3 entry. But I do think we have some options here that I'd like to see what the optimizer gets. So yes.
One thing, Mike, delete the rule you just made, but make it one instead. We're going to go with here. Yeah, just go with the one and then do one run back option. By the way, while we're setting these rules, did you see the Josh Jacobs story that came out yesterday?
No.
He is expecting his 9th child from his 8th different woman. That is this guy, but running backs don't have much of a shelf life in the NFL. It's the average career length is 2.5 years or something like that. This guy is going to be playing Frank Gore years at the kind of pace he's going at. He's going to need it to afford that kind of child support. So maybe something to consider. We got Josh Jacobs. He's probably going to be wanting the rock in some of these lineups. So let's start building these, Mike, and see what pops up. So Patrick Mahomes, lock him in, run the lineups, build 50 of them. We'll see what pops up. What are your expectations here, Matt? Do you think we're going to be getting to more Travis Kelce or Tyreek Hill?
I do worry that it's going to do something similar with our lineups and give us one of these value plays like a Byron Pringle or a Demarcus Robinson. But I'm hoping that it gives us a stack of Kelsey, who just gives us a floor really unlike any other tight end. And then Hill, who obviously has probably the best ceiling week to week of any wide receiver.
So my expectation is we get to more Tyreek Hill for this reason. We forced a run back option. And Darren Waller, as of right now, is listed as questionable, but he's in our projections. My gut feeling is that we're going to get to a lot of Mahomes, Tyreek Hill, with Darren Waller as the run back option at tight end. Although who knows, Hunter Renfrow has been a really good value a lot of weeks in a row. So maybe it could be him as well. But that's my guess. We'll see what the results show. Mike, bring up the screen. All right, there we go. And that is kind of what I was expecting there. We've got Tyreek Hill. And there you go. You don't have to be worried about us getting to a bunch of like Mecole Hardman or Byron Pringle. We're just running the optimal lineups. Pretty reasonable to me right here. You can see Travis Kelce is the second most popular run back option. Tyreek Hill being number one. We're getting to both of them. Darren Waller, Hunter Renfrow. I actually like the looks of this build quite a bit. How about you?
Yeah, absolutely. And we're definitely going to have to take this information up till Sunday to find out if Waller's in there. But yeah, I'm very happy with what I'm seeing too. And if as we scroll through these tabs here, I'm seeing us fit in a lot of other quality plays here. It doesn't look like we have to sacrifice the floor of our worst player for a lot of these lineups. So it does speak to the different kind of game, the different puzzle that FanDuel and DraftKings present week to week here. But yeah, this looks enticing.
And then I'm curious, click on the running backs tab really quick, Mike. Let's see what we've got popping up there. DeAndre Swift. And my expectation is that he is not going to end up playing. He's in our projections right now. Ultimately, I think DeAndre Swift isn't going to play. So that's going to move around some of these options a little bit. While we're talking about the DeAndre Swift I just brought up, because he's popping up in these lineups, are you going to want to go back to Jamal Williams this week?
Man, that was tough to see. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know because it really felt like the passing game role wasn't there in the way that I was hoping for, and I don't need a rushing a rushing only back on a team that's consistently playing from behind. So I don't feel the same way this week as I did last week, but he's not unplayable by any means.
All right, another running backs here. Looks like we've got Deontay Foreman popping up a little bit here. He did have 19 carries last week. The Tennessee Titans, for everybody who thinks that the offense looks much worse without Derrick Henry, sure, they've been worse. They're also dealing with other injuries. They ran all over, who was it? All over New England of all teams. The last time we saw them play, they ended up getting their asses kicked 36-13, but Foreman was massive. Hilliard was massive. They both had over 100 rushing yards. It was just bad turnovers. Each of them had a fumble. Ryan Tannehill threw a couple interceptions. There's one really bad one in the end zone. They were in that game a lot more than the final score really dictates. One other running back who's popping up a lot here, Javonte Williams. No real surprise there when you consider that Melvin Gordon isn't expected to play. Williams looked really good to me last week, and now he has this matchup against Detroit. He's actually my favorite running back on the slate right now. So I would actually argue that as much as he's popping up in some of these lineups, I think we should get into even more of Javonte Williams. How are you feeling about him?
Oh, if Melvin Gordon doesn't play, he's going to be uber popular, but I don't care. I mean, he already had PFF's best elusive rating in the NFL going into last week's game, and then he pretty much showed everyone why he was such a high pick in the second round on national TV last week. So I absolutely think Javonte Williams is a strong play against Detroit's middling defense here. It becomes a tournament play only here. I think it's a strong tournament play, but a tournament play only if Gordon is in this week.
Yeah, and Gordon right now is officially listed as questionable. He said he thinks you always get these weird quotes from players. He's like, I think I'll be able to go, which what does that really say to us? So also, if players are so overly optimistic about their injuries, they have a leg amputated, be like, I'm ready to play tomorrow. And what we'll see with Melvin Gordon. I think though I think Javonte Williams was so good last week that it would be silly for the Broncos to not work him in and get him more involved in the game plan. So even with Gordon in there, I expect a bigger workload from Javonte.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. Only thing we're betting on then is rational coaching.
Yeah,
Sometimes
which
it's a losing battle.
Oftentimes it is a losing battle, especially when you look at, last night's game, for instance, where, hey, look, the Steelers are down by 1,000,000 points. What are they going to do in the fourth quarter? Oh, punt and run the football with Najee Harris. And you never know how that'll shake out. So for the final stack here, we're doing something a little different. I'm going to look over at Odd Shopper, which, if you look over there, we have we have projections for players relative to their player prop odds in going over or under their passing yards for quarterbacks, which is what I'm looking at here. And I'm trying to find some good bets for player props. And I want to see what we could do to build lineups around those as well, because it stands to reason if there's a player that has a really low passing yardage total that we're way over the top of, there could be value in DFS since it's a player who could be going under-owned. So one thing that stands out to me is Russell Wilson. If you look at the QB props there, yeah. So Russell Wilson has an over-under of 239.5 passing yards for this weekend. We have him projected for about 280 yards. So all that put together, I think Russell Wilson could be a player who's going a little bit overlooked this week in Seahawks stacks as a whole. Then also you look at our top stacks tool, the Seattle Seahawks. We only have 4% ownership going to Russell Wilson, but nearly a 10% chance for them to be the top stack of the slate. Now, I know Russell Wilson's not looked good since coming back from his finger injury. Do you think there's a chance he gets back on track here, Matt?
Yeah, I do. Each week he gets further away from that surgery. I still think that he has a chance to look more and more like himself. And the thing we keep seeing from the Seattle offense is that they're not changing the game plan. They're still going deep in this game plan, in their offensive game plan. And now we've seen at least a couple of times where Russell Wilson and Tyler Lockett have been able to connect on deep passes. Still not a lot from DK Metcalf, but they can click on all cylinders here. We could see a huge blow-up game at low ownership with a Wilson stack. Absolutely.
Yeah, good matchup against the Houston Texans. And it's still Russell Wilson. He was one of the best fantasy players in the league last year and for the last handful of years. Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf, really high upside receivers. It just hasn't all come together for the Seattle Seahawks this year, and they've done dumb stuff like add Adrian Peterson to the roster, which is infuriating, but I think better times are to come. Before we build this stack, I do want to shout out our sponsor, Jock Market. If you guys are unfamiliar with Jock Market, totally different way to play daily fantasy sports. They've got a stock market, but for athletes. So there's an IPO period. You bid on the players, and then after the game start, it doesn't mean that your time on the app is done. You can still buy, sell, trade players. Really fun way to play daily fantasy sports. And if you use the promo code Awesemo, you sign up right now, you get up to a $50 bonus on your first deposit. Also, if you're not sure how much you should be bidding on these players over at Jock Market, good news, because we have free IPO projections over at Awesemo.com, and that'll help you guide you to figure out who you want to bid on. All right, let's make these Russell Wilson Seattle Seahawks stacks. He's a little cheaper this week on DK, 6,600. Matt, we know there's rushing upside. So do you want to get one or two stack options with Russell Wilson?
I'm actually going to say we want two. I don't know if I would agree with you that there is rushing upside. He's got one game with over 30 yards rushing and just two with over 25. Since he came back from injury, he's been at his last three games, 2 yards rushing, 16 yards rushing, 15 yards rushing. So I think two.
All right, I can get on board with that. As far as a run back, I don't want to force a run back when they're going up against the Houston Texans. It could be a disaster at times. We do have Davis Mills is now expected to start at quarterback. Does that change your outlook on Houston Texans run backs at all?
I was talking about this with Laffy on the matchup show yesterday. I do think the chance of Brandon Cooks just getting peppered with targets does boost a little bit, but I don't think we need to force a run back. If Brandon Cooks just gets in there as a value play, fantastic.
All right, so let's run the lineups here. And we pretty much have everything set there. Just Mike, delete the run back stack. You've got the other rule already in there. So yeah, the opposing team stack, and we're good to go. We could just run it like that. And Russell Wilson locked in. Cool. Now, Matt, who do you think pops up more here? DK Metcalf or Tyler Lockett? And we're probably going to be wrong, whichever one we think is going to score better. It was a conundrum last year. Lockett or Metcalf this week?
Oh man, Metcalf. I'm going for it. I think it's his time. He's due.
All right. And by the way, I put you on the spot just to answer this way. Play both of them. I think that it's a fool's errand to go really heavy on DK Metcalf or Tyler Lockett. It's so difficult to predict which one it's going to be on a week-to-week basis. So I think you're wise to get exposure to both of them. and don't really take a hard stand. I made Matt take a stand there because I want to put him on the spot, but you guys don't have to do that. All right, let's run these lineups, Mike, and let's see the results. What pops up? So Gerald Everett showing up a lot as a tight end option, a real lot as a tight end option, something that I would be, if this was a set of lineups that I built, I would actively be trying to cut back on that exposure number to Gerald Everett. And it's not that I don't think Gerald Everett is a viable tight end in GBBs. I just don't have quite that much of him. Wide receivers, looks like we're getting to DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett's up there also. So actually, I feel pretty good about this at least. The Everett's a little heavy for me, but there's a pretty good split of DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett that I feel comfortable with. How would you feel if you were uploading lineups where you had this kind of split? A little more Metcalf, but Lockett's still in the mix.
Yeah, I feel okay about this, and I actually don't feel as terrible looking at the stats from the last 3 weeks when I see so much Gerald Everett. I probably would dial it back a little bit, but he's got 19 targets over the last 3 games here for the Seahawks. That's second on the team, 1 ahead of Tyler Lockett and 1 behind DK Metcalf. I would still say Lockett and Metcalf's target share is much more stable week to week than Everett, but hey, 19 targets over the last 3 weeks is nothing to scoff at.
Yeah, and then some of the other players that are popping up. Let's check out those running backs, Mike. I'm kind of curious what RBs we're getting to in this stack. Austin Eckler showing up a lot. Saquon Barkley, DeAndre Swift. Like I said, I don't think he's going to end up playing. We've got Javonte Williams popping up. Leonard Fournette's in there, but he's going to be popular. I don't have an issue with getting to, that 14% number on Leonard Fournette. How do you feel about that kind of allocation to him outside of Tampa Bay stacks?
No, not at all. And we're seeing the ownership projection around 20% for him right now. So you're still under the field. You're still taking a stand, but you're not completely dead in the water if he ends up having one of those 4 touchdown games. I mean, he's been fantastic over the last few weeks, but he's been a little bit lucky in terms of touchdown upside. So I don't hate the play by any means.
Yeah, actually, it's funny. The thing that I like the most going through this is going to be Russell Wilson, the over on that passing yards, or just to reiterate the number we have from Odd Chopper, over under 239.5 passing yards. We have projected for 280. So we have an expected ROI of 47%, that winning 78% of the time. So we'll just close with that. How do you feel about that Odd Chopper number on the over for passing yards for Russell Wilson?
I've said this before. Sometimes you just take the matchup out of it when our numbers are that strong. In 8 out of 10 simulations, essentially, Russell Wilson goes over. You just do it. You push the button.
I totally agree. I love it. And that's a really low number. And I think that maybe the game script is being valued a little bit too much by the bookmakers, just assuming like, hey, they might have to run the ball, but Chris Carson's out, and we know that Pete Carroll does like to run the football. I don't know it's going to inhibit Russell Wilson to that extent. And also, it's not like there's a massively wide point spread for this game. Seattle's favored by 8 points. It's not like this is a 15, 17-point spread like some of those Rams games as of late. So I, too, really do like the over on Russell Wilson. Guys, that is going to do it for us today. Thank you very much for watching. Do us a favor, like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Lots more content coming up today.